for making good decisions in life. So here are some of the values that I learned. Many because of how I was raised, many because of my belief in a higher being, and many of them because of the environment in which I was raised in the state of Texas. I believe in the universality of freedom. I believe there is an Almighty, and I believe the gift of that Almighty to every man, woman, and child on the face of the earth is freedom. And it influenced a lot of our foreign policy, that principle. I was pleased to see people vote for a free society in Iraq. I wasn't surprised. If you believe in the universality of freedom, it shouldn't surprise you when people do courageous things to live in a free society. I also believe that freedom and democracy yield peace. One of the interesting ironies of my presidency was my relationship with the Prime Minister of Japan, Prime Minister Koizumi. Oh, here in the 21st century, most people say, what's the big deal? We've been dealing with Japan on a friendly basis for quite a while. 60 years ago, 18-year-old Navy fighter pilot George H.W. Bush signed up to fight the Japanese. 60 years later, his son and a son of a member of the militaristic Japanese government works to enhance our mutual security and to keep the peace. Isn't it interesting? I can assure you in 1944 or 45 or 46, if somebody would have stood up and said, I promise you Japan and the United States will be close allies, and I said, what an idealistically hopeless fool you are. You ask your grandparents or parents if they ever thought in those days whether peace would be possible between the United States and Japan, an alliance that would help each other. They said, look, we're too bitter an enemy. And yeah, I witnessed it. And by the way, 60 years isn't all that long, particularly if you're 63 years old. It goes just like that. And 60 years really isn't all that long in the march of history. And one of the ironies and a lesson for me, the ironies of my presidency and a lesson for me, is that freedom and democracy are transformative. An enemy became an ally. It didn't happen by happenstance. It happened because democracy changes society. And I believe someday if the United States continues to believe strongly in the universality of freedom, we'll see peace in the Middle East because democracy will prevail. I believe in a principle I acted on was you can spend your money better than the government can spend your money. I believe government has some obligations to pay the salaries of those who wear the uniform. And by the way, the thing I think the most about the presidency is to be the commander-in-chief of such an incredible we're a collective country to have people volunteer nation in a time of danger. I think you're well wise in the government when it comes to how you decide things for your family. And so that's why I've cut taxes. I believe that to whom much is given, much is required. That's what I believe. People say, why would you even care whether a baby is dying because of a mosquito bite in Africa? Well, for two reasons. One, I believe we're involved in an ideological war against people who murder the innocent to achieve their political objectives, and they can only recruit when they find hopeless people. And there's nothing more hopeless for a mom to see a baby die because of a mosquito bite and malaria. There's nothing more hopeless. Or there's nothing more hopeless than be orphaned because of HIV/AIDS, knowing that the world can do something about it. So I decided for our national security interests and our moral interests to use some of your hard-earned money to help save lives, because I acted on the principle to whom much is given, much is required, and I believe we ought to do that on an individual basis every day in the United States of America. So those are some of the principles I acted on, and they stayed inviolate in my soul. You've got principles that you live on. And my hope for you is that they stay inviolate in your soul, no matter how unpopular or socially unacceptable some may think they are. It's not only a lesson for presidents, it's a lesson for citizens. I had 3 buffs in the Oval Office. Churchill, I love Churchill. I don't know if any of the youngsters here have read about Winston Churchill. I strongly suggest you do. It's a great lesson on leadership. The study of Churchill will teach you how to lead. I had a bust of Eisenhower, and I had a bust of Lincoln. Interestingly enough, one day after September 11th, not the day after, but a time after September 11th, I was reflecting there in the Oval Office. And it dawned on me that all 3 of those busts that I had placed in shortly after I had gotten sworn in were wartime leaders. I didn't put them in there because they were wartime leaders. I put them in there for 3 different reasons. But they were all wartime leaders. The interesting thing about life is oftentimes you don't know what is going to come. You see, when I campaigned, I never said, elect me. I look forward to being a wartime leader. It's the worst thing a president ought to be. It's the last choice of a president is to ever commit our troops into harm's way. I made the deliberate decision that the best way, however, to protect the country against the cold-blooded killers was to go on the offense, stay on the offense, and bring them to justice before they hurt us again. It wasn't popular. But I believe it's right. But the lesson that I learned in the presidency was, and I learned a lot of hard ways, by the way, and this is not self-pity. That being the president was a joy, not a burden. I learned it when I hugged the comrades who were wounded. I learned it when I saw the relatives of those who died in combat. I learned it through this attack on our country, that oftentimes in life you get dealt a hand you did not expect or want to play. I'm sure that's happened to you. Matter of fact, almost all of us are going to get dealt a hand we didn't expect or want to play. And that's not the question in life. The question isn't whether you're going to get dealt a hand. The question is how you play the hand. And the remarkable thing about being president is I got to see people play some of the toughest hands in some of the most courageous and noble ways. Let me tell you a story about Commander Kristoff. Kristoff was an orthopedic surgeon in Reno, Nevada. I was doing my duty. What I felt was my duty was trying to comfort the families of the fallen. He had lost a son in Anbar Province, Iraq, Marine. Broke his heart, needless to say. His wife's heart. He took me aside after we had cried together and hugged, talked about the boy, and said, you know, I want to honor my son by joining the military. I said, well, how old are you, Dr. Kristoff? He was 1 year younger than me. I kind of looked at him. I didn't say what I felt like. I said, sir, we're both a little long in the tooth. I did say, I'll check into it. So I got back to Washington. I called Pete Pace, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. By the way, the Marines have been the first Marine ever to serve as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.